Welcome back to the Wolf of Queen Street podcast series. Welcome back to the audio, the video series. Yes, I've taken about a month off and had some time with my family to relax and get back into it. And I'm excited for today's episode. But before we get into it, I just want to do a shout out to my sponsor, JobSearchQOD.com. JobSearch Queensland help you to get into your job, your ideal job quicker so you can save time, feel happier, and earn more money. And if this sounds like something that you want to get involved in and want someone to help you to find that ideal job, go over to jobsearchqod.com. But like I said, I've had a bit of a month off since my last episode. Wanted to have a bit of a breakaway from the whole world of podcasting, content, and everything else. And I wanted to bring someone back in on the first episode of a bit of a break that's in a space I don't know a lot about. And that's rare these days, but it's cool. It excites me. But someone that's doing something that's amazing, and the achievements he's done over the last sort of 12 months, 18 months, and a couple of years is just off the charts. So today I have Sam Kamani on my show, a tech startup specialist who runs his own podcast series called Want Money, Got Money. And he's also an Amazon bestseller author with his book, The 30-Day Startup, How to Create a Successful Tech Startup in 6 Weeks with Less than 50K. And I think in the last time I checked that it done almost over or around 11,000 downloads on that book, and it was an Amazon bestseller. And as well on top of that, Sam has started up multiple tech startups and on-sold them, and he's continuing to do that and breaking the mold in the tech world from New Zealand and throughout the world. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to talk with you, Lawrence. Actually, I've been listening to your podcast and I'm having really enjoyable experience listening to such a wide variety of guests from so many different parts of the world. So well done for that. Yeah, so I'll tell you a bit about myself, as pretty much you gave an amazing introduction. So I've been involved in tech startup space for the last nearly 15 years. I've worked in New Zealand, India, Thailand, Silicon Valley. I've worked in different places. I've had 2 exits in past. But about a year and a half ago, as you said, that, before that, I didn't used to go out and speak. I didn't used to go out and share anything that I knew. And a year and a half ago, I thought, you know what, I'm going to change this. I'm going to start sharing everything I know, all the experiences I've had, all the mistakes that I've made, and all the things that I got right. So other people can hopefully maybe learn or take 1 or 2 things off that and not make any of my mistakes. So
sorry to interrupt the current show, but just to let you know, if you're enjoying what you've seen, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. So next time another episode comes out, you'll be able to see it first. Back to the show.
I started doing that and I thought I'll just do it for my own benefit, my own pleasure. Even if no one listens, I don't really mind. And the first book I wrote, it did really well organically, no advertising, no promotion, nothing. So I thought, you know what? People are reaching out to me on LinkedIn and saying that they really enjoyed reading it, or they went out and started something or built something. So I thought maybe there is something here. And that's how I started writing more, going more on other sort of podcast as a guest speaker, going to live events as a keynote speaker. And I also started mentoring at AUT University, which is Auckland University of Technology. And there's another university called Te Wananga Aotearoa, which is actually New Zealand's largest university by the number of students enrolled. So I mentor at these 2 places in their program, which is like an incubator to incubate startups or start and accelerate startups. Doing all that, running my agency where we build SaaS products and mobile apps and things like that, I get an opportunity to meet like 2 or 3 new founders in the tech startup space from somewhere around the world every single day for the last year and a half or 2 years. And that has enabled me to learn about things on where I see what successful founders do differently to the ones who are not that successful yet or on that early in their journey. So even this morning, I had a meeting with an entrepreneur in Philadelphia and another startup founder in Atlanta in US. And they all had amazing ideas and stuff. But yeah, I get to meet a lot of really amazing people, interesting people. So very happy to share any of my experience, with your audience.
Oh, that's amazing, Sam. Like I said to anyone that's listening, go look in what Sam does. Go look in what his brand is about, what he's delivered, what his experience. Like I said, he's built up tech startups before, and I think he calls it. He's done exits. I think that means he's sold it or gotten out of that business. But one thing to the audience at the moment that's listening in is anyone that's come across is tech startup. Fundamentally, let's go back to the first question, right? To a real simple question, even to myself that's in a lot of the industry and to a lot of people come across going, what is a tech startup? What exactly in 60 seconds would you say to someone, and they go, I hear all the time, there's all these tech startups in Silicon Valley and all that. What does it mean for a tech startup? What does that actually mean?
Okay, so for me,
Yep.
everyone has a different definition. For me, a tech startup is fundamentally different to a small business in how it can be scaled. So a mom and dad's coffee shop is a great small business, but it's not a tech startup. A tech startup is something which can be scaled nearly infinitely, pretty much. You could have so that and it can deliver rapid growth. So those are the two fundamental characteristics, I would say, that define a tech startup. And generally, how you scale and how you deliver that growth, you use technology to leverage that scale and deliver that growth. The end result of it, you could be providing physical products, it doesn't matter. It could be providing food, but Uber Eats is a tech startup, whereas the coffee shop at the end of it is not a tech startup because they cannot scale and have 1 billion people using it. Uber Eats can have 1 billion people around the world using it. So it's the scalability and leveraging technology to get that scalability and get that growth. That is a tech startup.
Great. I love that example. I mean, even for myself, it makes it really clear because, being in the entrepreneur game and seeing business owners and startups in different forms, like I said, is sometimes you go, hold on, my products in, a smart space or a technology space, is it seen as a tech startup? And, from your definition at the moment, if it's unscalable and it's and the growth,
you cannot have
rapid,
growth.
and can't have rapid growth with scalability, then fundamentally it's not a tech startup. It is a business, but it's not a tech startup. So
it could be a very lucrative small business. Yeah.
Awesome. So Sam, on to the next question is, and we'll go through is, what is, from your experience, what is the first most key important thing to understand if you want to get into a tech startup?
The first most important thing for pretty much any startup, not only a technology startup, and that is that you must have the ability and the desire to solve someone's problems or make their life better. Because where a lot of founders I see, they make the mistake, or where they start is that they start with an idea of a product. They start with the solution. That is the wrong place to start. You cannot put the carriage before the horse. You need the horse before, and that horse is the problem. And one of the examples I like giving is that you want to solve hair on fire problems. What I mean by that is that if you see someone and their hair is on fire and you're selling a fire extinguisher to them, it's not going to be a hard sell. It's going to sell itself. You would have product market fit just like that. So that is the type of problems you want to solve, that are like really hard burning problems that someone wants solved. The other thing is, things to think about when you are solving a problem is that, are these problems happening often enough? It should not be something like an isolated problem that happens once and never happens again. The another thing that you should look at is that problem sort of worth enough solving. It could not be a minor annoyance that there people are okay of not solving it. So yeah, that'd be the key thing.
That's great. You know, like you're saying, understanding the problem in the market, actually
Yes.
understanding what the problem is, and putting it in front of it. You know, we both run podcasts. We both run social media brands on the side of it from our day jobs and our businesses. And I can tell you, Sam has done the same thing that I've done when we started, and we would have gone, "Hey, I'm going to put content out there, or I'm going to put something out there for my customer that I think they want," right? And
Yes.
you know, Sam's a little bit younger in his journey than I am, and we can both admit when we met up a few weeks ago is
Yes.
that what we think our customers want is not what they want. Is not, you
Yeah.
know, some of you hit some of the home runs, but 9 times out of 10 you're striking out because what you think a customer wants, or what you think the marketplace actually wants, is not that. You actually,
Yeah.
and as Sam says, you've got to have that understanding of going into the marketplace and from the other side of the table and looking and going, this is what we want. This is the actual problem, and resolving it. And I love that example, Sam, that you gave of if someone's hair's on fire and you're standing next to them with a fire extinguisher, they're definitely going to buy your product.
Yeah.
That sort of understanding of how easy that sale is how we should be able to tell people with a company and a brand and a business is that's how clear an understanding of the product to the market you should have.
Yeah.
That's great. So obviously, you know, as you said, in the beginning stages of a tech startup is understanding the problem, you know,
Yes.
understanding the market that the problem is in, and then being able to see what the product is to resolve that problem. Product doesn't have to be something physical; it can be something digital,
Yeah.
it can be something as simple as text, software, even a physical product, food, and so forth. Like you said, Uber Eats is.
Yes.
So you've got that idea now. So anyone in the world will say, "Hey, I've got a great idea. You know, I've got a good business," and that sort of stuff. The next step is obviously to start the business and try and scale it, and as you would call in your world, user acquisition, which means get more customers or get more business and
Yes.
that sort of stuff. What is the key things for you to, when you've got your tech startup and your first idea, is to go into the next step of user acquisition? What is the key steps for the people listening?
Yep. Of course, I'll go a bit more into it, but
Yep.
you know, when someone says, "I've got a great idea for a product," in fact, the first thing you should ask them is, what is the problem you are solving?
Mhm.
Because once you know the problem, then you can define who has that problem,
Mhm.
because that is the key thing in user acquisition. It's like, who is going to be listening to your podcast or
Yep.
my podcast? So for me, I know they are other tech startup founders or investors or people in this ecosystem. So then once you know who has that problem, you know where to go and acquire them. Where
Mhm.
do they live? As in, what I mean is, where do they spend their time on? Do they spend their time on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, wherever it may be? And it
Mhm.
changes. It will always be different. But if you don't even know who has that problem,
Mhm.
then it is very hard to pitch it to them. If you just go and say everyone is my customer, that means no one is your customer.
Yep.
Especially when you're starting a startup or a small business, you have to define your user, you have to define your customer
Mhm.
really well, and understand them really well.
That's great. So that, you know, that just defines, as you said, furthermore, understanding what your product is, understanding your customer and so forth. So if you get to that step, you know, understanding where my customer is, whether it's on social media or where it's in a city, where it's in a
Yes.
business type, and what the habits and then so forth is to be able to get in front of them is, how do you then take that next step of going, let's grow more of that? What is the process to follow going, okay, I know my customer or my avatar, as some people
Yes.
call it, is how do I get in front of them more, and how do I get them to actually come into my product or buy my product?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to find a niche. If you don't find a niche, especially for a tech startup,
Yep.
software startup, or any even hardware startup, if you don't find a niche, it is going to be super challenging. I'd like to give you an example of
Mm-hmm.
that, and that is Trade Me. So Trade Me, for people who are outside of New Zealand, Trade Me is like eBay,
Yep.
and they sell everything on Trade Me. As in, they don't, as in people sell everything. It's a
Yep.
marketplace. Um, And over the last 15 years in New Zealand, TradeMe has had over 100 different competitors, and every one of them has failed because as a marketplace, it is super challenging to get buyers when you don't have sellers, and it's super challenging to get sellers when you don't have buyers. They call it a chicken and an egg problem.
Yep.
So you have a chicken and egg problem, and then there's so many categories, and someone comes looking for a tea set on there, and then there's couches there, and then like there's all sorts of random things. So you need such a huge critical mass when you don't have a niche. And a lot of these, that nearly all these 100 competitors that came to compete with TradeMe, the mistake they made is that they went too broad too early. They didn't have a niche. Now there are people who have managed to succeed and build a successful marketplace in New Zealand, like Designer Wardrobe. What they did is they picked a niche that, okay, women are wearing expensive dresses in balls, in wedding receptions, things like that. They only wear once. They could be renting it out. They could be selling those or something like that online. So they just started with a Facebook group. They built a community first, and they started just in that niche. And then once they had like 60,000 or 100,000 members in New Zealand, 100, 200,000 in Australia, they went and moved them away from Facebook onto their app, saying that, hey, much better experience, come over here. And so they went through that niche, and then because they had that niche, they knew the problem they were solving. They knew their customer really, really well, that it is women in this age to this age, they live in this part of the world, all that stuff. They could do that. If they had gone too broad, you'd go there looking for a dress and you would find a car, and then there'd be like, it's not a match. You would need, like, instead of 60,000, you would need 3 million people there if you wanted to do every niche. And that's why they succeeded. Now they have an app, and then over time, then they added men's sort of tuxedos and suits, and then they added kids' clothes, and then they added shoes and sneakers. And so you can always expand later on, just like Amazon. For the first 4 years, all Amazon did was books. Whereas Barnes and Nobles and Borders and all these people were also selling CDs and DVDs. Amazon said, no, you know what? We're going to go 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep. So until they had 2,000 plus employees even back then, and they were only doing books. They weren't even touching CDs and DVDs. That's how focused they were on books. So that is because they knew their niche, they knew their audience. And it's very easy to reach your audience when you know and you pick and target a niche. Now, every niche is different. So your question on customer acquisition would be super different to everyone. You have to find low cost things in the early stages, and there are always things like that. Just like in 2004, I was buying AdWords for businesses, and they were 10 cents. 2014, same businesses that I was advising them, don't buy AdWords, because the same 10-cent AdWord is now $8, and you need 100 people to look at it and then one to buy it. You have $800 you'll spend for a $200 sale. It doesn't make sense. So I was sending them to catalogs, like physical catalogs, where no one was advertising back then. They were nearly dead. So they would take ads for $10, or doing ads at golf, people watching golf at 3 a.m. in the night. But that was our target market. We were getting TV ads for $15, which is unheard of in early 2000s. So you can always find things that are really underpriced, but your niche is there. So it would be very different for every business. You have to figure out, where your audience is, and if you know your audience really well, you'd be able to find something that would give you an insanely high ROI.
Yeah, it's awesome, Sam. I love the explanation, and like you said, it's hard to say how do you increase user acquisition or increase your customers unless you understand the actual product that we're talking about. For an example, at the moment, but it's great how you still explain it and people can understand those. Once you get it and you understand it, and you know the spaces, look for the gaps, look for the cracks that you can still get it in the beginning that's cheap enough I say the word cheap because I'm not going to actually put a number out there, because sometimes cheap could be $100 compared to $1,000, or
Yeah.
cheap could be $1 compared to $10. So look at those sort of opportunities and so forth. And I mean, so many social platforms at the moment. As you said, that example with the clothing industry and the Facebook groups, I see a lot of businesses now are utilizing that as an idea in the beginning. It is quite a flooded space, but if you've got an effective brand and you in your niche, like you said, Facebook groups is a great way to slowly build 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 followers while you're still looking at the other opportunities. But it's something definitely to think about on your business and what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to scale.
Yes. But yeah, just one more point. Yeah, because the thing is that a customer for buying car parts,
Yep.
Aftermarket car parts or JDM car parts would be completely different to someone buying ballroom dresses, you know. So you have to understand your audience, and they would have these niche places where they hang out, where the attention is not overpriced. So you don't want to do a Super Bowl ad when none of your customers are watching it, you know. So it's just, yeah.
I mean, it's so true that there's still stuff out there at the moment, and because you're not in the niche, you don't understand it. There's still let's just use something that's a bit old style that still floats around: magazines, print magazines in the shops. And I look at it and go, I'm a person that lives on this thing way too much, right? And I look at the print magazines and I go, who buys that? But there obviously is still, at some stage, there is still a market for people to buy those magazines, whether it's car magazines, home and garden, tech or Forbes, Time, and so forth. And it's because I'm not in that space, I don't understand it. But it's, as you said at the moment, is if you understand your customer and they're in that space, you need to find a way to get in front of them as well.
But if you're doing every single product under the sun, under the roof, it's like if you say, oh, everyone's my customer, it's going to be painful. It's going to be very, very hard. Or unless you have like insanely deep pockets. But even then, people don't do it, Yeah.
I mean, it is a sort of a finite challenge of being able to put yourself into it. I mean, like I said, we've both got podcast brands. I'm coming on, almost close to 2 years. And even with my journey and with Sam's journey, is you go through quite wide and then you come in narrow, and then you got to go maybe a little wider or maybe a little left with the brand and stuff in our own businesses. And it's totally true on that. I started, and I'll put my hand up going, I went way wide. I went like I'll speak to anyone and everyone that I thought that would resonate. And then, turn around and went, okay, just need to just bring it a little bit more in. So from my customer base, they got what they wanted within their niche.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Makes complete sense. It's like I did that mistake. Can I share an example?
Yeah, totally.
Between my two books. Okay. So for anyone who's author, okay. So I wrote this first book, 30-day startup, and look at how specific it is that in 6 weeks, in $50,000. So this is, it is insanely specific, because I didn't care about, even if I sold 0 copies, I had no idea. Like now it's nearly at 12,000. So I had no idea it would do well. It was my first book. And then I got greedy the second time around. This is my second book, Business in the Time of Corona. And it is how to pivot. It says how to pivot your career, startup, or business in disruption and succeed in. So it's like I'm trying to cover all the bases, and it didn't do well at all because it was too broad. Even though people who have read it, strangers who do read it, they comment and they tell me that it's I get much better reviews of my second book than the first one, but people are not buying it. So that is my learning curve. And that's why when I started my podcast, I had a very sort of defined niche that I'm only going to interview founders of funded startups or investors. So if they are a founder of a successful startup and that startup has not received funding, I would probably not interview them unless there's something exceptional. Or if they are an investor and they invest in startups, I'll interview them. So it's that niche, and I'm only going to go after that, even though it would be a very small niche, but it's fine. It's okay.
No, that's great, Sam. And and like we said, it doesn't matter if it's a small niche.
Yeah,
If you got 1% of a market share in the world, there's 7 billion people. Just I'm not going to think of that number.
exactly right.
That's a lot of millions. If you had
Yes.
0.1% of a market share, there's still millions. So
That's still
this
7
the
million,
yeah
0.1%.
yeah, there we
Yes.
go. Sam's got it, and that's the sort of stuff of where we got to not be fearful that our niche is too small. We just got to make sure that our market, as in Sam said in the very beginning of the episode, is the product that we sell into a problem actually wants to be solved. So if you go out
Yes.
and say, hey, when people walk and they wear, I'm going to use about 4 different names from it because it depends on where you are in the world. When you wear jandals, flip-flops, slops, pluckies for South Africans, anything on your feet, and they might say, hey, every time I wear it, I get a little scratch on the side of my foot because the pins on my foot goes. And you go, great, I'm gonna make this specific plaster that you can put on your foot each time you put a slip on that you won't get this small scratch. Yes, there's a problem. But the likelihood of people actually putting this plaster on their foot each time they go out in the beach in the summer is likely none. So that's
Yeah.
the sort of stuff of, understanding and going back to that one. But Sam, as we're sort of coming out to the end of the show today and talking about really,
Yes.
thinking about the customers, thinking about the ideas, thinking about how to get in front of them, I'd love to know your thoughts on, firstly, is what are the sort of 1 to 3 outside of what we covered off, sort of failures that companies get themselves into, or entrepreneurs? So sort of the standard, why do startups fail?
Yep. Even though I know you said we outside the area, most startup founders
Mm-hmm.
want to solve problems, but they don't. They just don't. They build things because they like the idea,
Yeah.
because they've already convinced themselves that people need this, people want this, and they build that. Second, they don't understand the difference between acquisition and engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And for a tech startup, that could be a killer. What I mean by that is that, you know, Facebook or
Mm-hmm.
Google, their value is only defined by the amount of engagement on the total engagement on their platform.
Yep.
So it's like if Facebook has 2 billion users and no one ever logs in, no one ever goes to it, it is worth $0. Same with Instagram, same with TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
So the number of users don't actually matter. So it's often, and smart investors know this. So if a startup founder goes to an investor and says that, hey, we have got 500,000 registered users in the last 6 months or last year, you could get that by doing Facebook ads and Instagram ads and doing
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of funky ad campaigns and just paying people to join your startup.
Yeah.
I mean, to download your app or whatever it is, product. But if no one is using it, it is not valuable. That is the engagement. So how often are people using it? Is it And that is the real gauge of
Mm-hmm.
a product market fit. That means you have got it or not. And a lot of founders get carried away with just focusing on user acquisition but missing out on engagement. When there is no engagement, that means there are massive issues. They are not really solving a problem. And apart from that, the number one killer of small businesses, not only startups, this
Yep.
applies to everyone, is cash flow. So if you have a small business,
Mm-hmm.
ask them how is the cash flow, and they would have to take a few minutes off to go and cry in a corner and come back. Because as I've owned small businesses, I've owned startups, cash flow is an ongoing issue. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is another big thing that kills off startups and small businesses.
No, I totally agree with the last one. I think most entrepreneurs have started up multiple companies, lost multiple dollars, written a
Yes.
lot of them off, admittedly failed in quite a few of them. But that's part of the journey. That's why we are crazy and we call ourselves entrepreneurs. Only a few select would say that you're doing that, because as much as it looks like it's glory and it looks like it's fame and it's rich in money, that's only the 1% of the 1% that gets it. The rest of us, it's stress, it's
Yes.
headaches, it's way too many
Yeah.
hours a day doing stuff that you don't get paid for. But we just
Yeah.
love it. But yeah, I love that, Sam, again, saying on understanding of the engagement to the acquisitions and as part of the failure. So yes, you're getting all the numbers coming in the door, but once they're inside, no one's actually doing anything with the brand or the product, and
Yeah.
seeing the incorrect relationship between the two could be totally take a company down. And that's a
Yeah.
great tip on that.
There is a Yeah, there is a technical name to it. If you want, I can give you a bit more on the technical side. It is called CAC, or customer acquisition cost, and the other one is called LTV, which is the lifetime value of a customer. So what you want to see is the CAC to LTV ratio. So say it costs me $10 to acquire a customer, but in the whole lifetime they're only going to spend $8 with me. Then my CAC to LTV ratio is unsustainable.
Yep.
And you want to find a sustainable CAC to LTV ratio for a startup.
Yeah, I've heard about, I haven't known the acronyms, but I got explained this through, and a lot of people in the world that's listening know we've got a lot of online personal trainers. Let's use this as an example, right? So you will see a lot of advertising, a lot of directions to sign up to their meal plan and their apps and so forth, right? And most of them are $4, $6, or $8 sort of a week and so forth. And in Sam's example at the moment, what there will be is you have a calculation running your ads or running your business going, okay, it cost me $100 of ads to get one person to sign up. And you might go, oh, shit. That's a bit of money, right? But when you understand all your analytics behind it, it might not seem that bad, because what you know is the average lifetime that someone that has signed up to your product stays on for at least 12 to 14 months. So, and on that average, their income to your business might be $250, $300, or $400. So I just go $8 a week, 52 weeks, it's $416, and it costs you $100 to get them. So that means for every $100 you spend, you're going to make 300. You're going to make 300% on top of that. And that's where Sam was talking about it. If you have that good understanding as well, once you get really into the nitty gritty, then once I've seen business owners, once they realize in that light bulb, they go, shit, let's spend money right in the right area. Let's get those people, because once they can see, if I spend the right money, I'm straight away going to bring cash flow back. But as Sam said as well, is cash flow does become a challenge to a lot of us business owners. And even if you know those answers, you might not have that money to spend. And I'm sure Sam has off the air, once anyone that's listening might be interested, you can totally hit Sam up, is he'll know people out there that are investors. He's interviewing them.
Absolutely.
So if you're listening or thinking about it and have the great idea and understand your customer and understand exactly what you need to do, but you're short on some dollars with a good business model, I'm sure he can introduce you to some people or show you the right way to go around that. But Sam, just as we're coming up to the end of today's episode, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming on the show, giving some key insights into tech startups, business startups, key fundamentals to understand how to sell it, how to scale it, and a few mistakes that people are commonly making in the business place.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for asking me such insightful questions. It's been great fun.
Thanks so much, Sam, and to everyone else. As always, Sam's details and everything about him will be in the audio podcast or the video series on YouTube if you're watching. So you can reach out to himself or just to myself if you have anything in the business area or space that you want to ask him. But as always, at the end of the show, I say to everyone that's listening or watching, I don't ask much out of my audience. I don't ask much out of my fans. But if there's something that resonated with you today, if there's something that you took away and said, hey, that's really good, or you think someone else can have some insight, all I ask you is to send them the episode or tell them to come on over, come have a watch and listen, because together we can improve the world. Together we can help each other out, and it costs nothing. But at the end of the day, stay beautiful, stay powerful. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.